Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 85, noes 27.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could we have some, ask people to take conversations outside the chambers and for people to give some attention here. Mr. Speaker, in just a few moments, we're going to be taking up a resolution honoring the life and work of our dear friend and colleague, Barbara Clark. Before we do that, there will be some other resolutions to take up, which I'll ask you to take up in just a moment. Just some other housekeeping before we do that, however. First of all, for Democratic members, there will be a majority conference immediately at the conclusion of session today in the Speaker's conference room. And I would like members to be aware that when we do adjourn in honor of Ms. Clark, people should recognize that we will stand adjourned until May 26th, which is a legislative day tomorrow, and we will reconvene at Wednesday, June 1st at noon, as opposed to our normal 2 o'clock start. Noon on Wednesday, and Wednesday is a session day. With that, Mr. Speaker, you could take up any other resolutions before we take up the one honoring Mrs. Clark.
A number of resolutions. We'll take them up together. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The resolutions are adopted. Mr. Morelli.
Now, sir, if we could take up the resolution honoring Barbara Clark.
Clerk will read.
Resolution number 1407, Mr. Hasty. Legislative resolution celebrating the life and accomplishments of the Honorable Barbara M. Clark, New York State Assemblywoman of the 33rd Assembly District.
First, let me welcome Barbara's family here to the chamber. This is a reminder of one of the tougher days that we had here in session. And when I spoke at her funeral, with some very heartfelt moments, and I'm reminiscing over those moments. And again, it takes me back to my first, after I was elected in 2000, we had a retreat before session even started in 2001. And Barbara was one of the members who came over to me, because like I said, when you first get elected, it's like going to college. You may know a couple of people, but you don't really have that many close friends. But Barbara was very warm and motherly to me from that first time in November. I think it was in Saratoga, if I'm not mistaken, when we had our retreat. And it never stopped from that moment of her being very motherly to me. And as I said before, I remember the day that I was elected Speaker. I was walking out of the members' lounge, and she just stopped and said to me, "Hello, Mr. Speaker," looking like a proud mother on the day of one of her children's graduations. So may God bless Barbara's soul. Ms. Hyman on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak on the resolution of a former Assemblywoman, Barbara Clark. In Southeast Queens, she was a great pioneer, leader for education. She fought on behalf of the children and families that inhabited the communities of Queens Village, Hollis, Cambria Heights, and I remember her vividly fighting on behalf of Andrew Jackson, which is now Campus Magnet. She was an education warrior for the children and families, not just in Queens, but throughout this entire state. And it is an honor and a privilege to watch her work and learn from her. So to her family, I want you to know she has left a big hole in Queens, and it takes a lot of people to do the work that she did. So while she is gone, she is not forgotten. And I personally appreciated the work she did on behalf of education. Being a member of the Community Education Council, she was always there and an ally for us. She's been gone too soon, but her legacy will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Mr. Lentol on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Clark family and to all the friends that are here from the Clark family, I just want you to know that our hearts are still heavy from the loss of our sister Barbara. We've shared so much together in this assembly as friends, comrades in arms, with many members joining together for various causes throughout the years. But never that I can remember Barbara, who sat in that chair and in my aisle, somebody who I remember so fondly as an individual who has been so strong for the people that she represents, and for, most importantly, the education of children in our state. I think Kathy Nolan can appreciate that, because I'm sure that she got bothered as chair of that committee all the time to enact legislation that protected the kids of our state. I had the great honor, Mr. Speaker, and the great privilege to share with Barbara and her mom the opportunity to go to Israel and stand at the Sermon on the Mount, where we were all in awe of the place that we were and how significant it was for us to go to Israel and to be at the same place that Jesus delivered his speech and prayer for the poor, for the destitute, just like the people that Barbara represented and some of the people that I represent. And I can remember sharing tears with her mom and with her because of where we were. But more importantly, because we didn't expect to be there. We didn't expect to be in that special place. And I know that over the years, Barbara and I have had an opportunity to remember where we were that day and remember how we started out in this assembly, as I as an older member and she as a younger sister, to approach our jobs the way they should be approached, the way the press doesn't cover them, the way the press doesn't consider the way in which people do their jobs so effectively in this state. They just want to cover the bad and not the good. Well, Barbara, we remember the good. We remember what you did. We'll never forget you, because you have shone a light on this assembly, a light for good that will never die out. May your soul rest in peace.
Ms. Galiff on the resolution.
I rise just to speak about my friend and colleague, Barbara Clark. I came here in 1993, and Barbara had been here for not that many years before. And I think about the involvement that we had together. We had some similar minds on things. We pulled together, for those of you who were here then, a common sense caucus. You might ask what that was about. We were trying as together to try to get more criminal justice bills out on the floor. We also worked on some structural changes called a coup here in Albany together. So we had a lot of connection during that period of time on trying to alter the way the assembly and, well, basically how the assembly ran, because we didn't have control over the Senate. She was very involved with the Women's Caucus when I was here, trying to get issues out that affected women and families, and that was her way to pull together the education issues, the issues about rape for women from other countries coming here, and the problems that they were going through. So she had that ability through the Women's Caucus to do that. And I had the wonderful opportunity to travel to Cuba with Barbara and her husband, and who I haven't seen in a very long time. We had a great time in Cuba, and she and I promoted the fact that just because Fidel Castro was following us, that we wanted to go to the embassy, which was really the interest section. And so we called up. We made an appointment. We got the bus to go and meet with our so-called ambassador, and we foiled Fidel for a second, I guess. And we always chuckled about it afterwards up here about how wonderful Cuba was, but the paint was coming off of the buildings. The buildings were gorgeous, but Barbara Clark and I would go down and paint them. We never did it, but we thought about it a lot because, and probably that's going to be happening today as Cuba opens up. Somebody else is going to go down and paint them and not us. But we recognized in all of the exploration and all the people that we met down there that it was a country that really had great needs. And but I enjoyed being with both of them on that trip. And so I'd just like to say I felt like I've lost a good friend here, somebody that was a companion on so many different issues. And I know she loved her children and her family, and she spoke about them so much as she was talking about everybody's family in the state of New York. So we do miss her. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Weprin on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise as a friend and colleague of Barbara Clark. I knew Barbara Clark well before I was an elected official. When she first got elected, through my father, through my family, and she was always a mentor to me. When I first decided I was going to be running for the New York City Council because of term limits and vacancies, I ran in 2001. But Barbara was one of the first people I went to meet with, and she represented in the Assembly a very large part of my City Council district at the time. And I remember sitting down for her for lunch, and I had all my notes, and I was all prepared to tell her how qualified I was and how this was an opportunity for me to serve in public service. And, you know, I never even got to the first line where she said right away, I heard you may be running for City Council. What can I do to help? And I'll never forget that, how she was always, you know, so outgoing and friendly and really became a real mentor to me. And when I got elected to the City Council in 2001, we overlapped a lot in the Queens Village, Belrose area, and we did so many different events together. And one of my highlights of serving in this chamber was getting to sit next to Barbara in this chamber. I didn't in the beginning, and I did for the last 3 or 4 years, and it was a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I really got to, anytime my wife would call or my mother would call, you know, Barbara would say, is that your mother? Is that your wife? And she'd get on the phone, and she'd make sure she said hello and asked how everybody was doing, and she always talked about her family. She was always such a strong advocate for the children of our state, and she always advocated, as was said, but she also loved her own family and talked about her family very much. I'm just going to tell another anecdote how Barbara Clark saved me a number of years ago. It was during, I was going to the Throgs Neck Bridge with my wife, and we had an easy pass that apparently, I guess, had expired or wasn't replenished. This was a number of years ago. And somebody came over to the car and said, well, you've expired, and they confiscated the Easy Pass. So I said, well, how about if I just replenish it? Why do you have to confiscate it? And they said, no, we have to confiscate it. So I said, can I speak to a supervisor? So they sent the supervisor over. The supervisor came over and said, you an assemblyman? I said, yes, from Queens. Do you know my aunt, Barbara Clark? So I said, absolutely. I actually sit next to Assemblywoman Clark in the chamber. Here's your Easy Pass back. Have a great day. So Barbara has saved me in many ways. And all I can say is I personally have had a real, vacancy in this chamber. It's sitting next to this empty seat. And I miss Barbara very much. And may her memory be for a blessing.
Mr. Gottfried on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I have seen more members come and go than any of us. And one thing I've learned actually from the very start is that we are a very diverse group. We come from all parts of the state, not all parts of the political spectrum, but many. Constituents from different backgrounds. We come here with different qualities and different reasons for seeking public office, and we all focus on different aspects of the job. Barbara was always one of those members who was here so overwhelmingly because of her passion for trying to help the disadvantaged in our society, and particularly the children in our society. As I say, different of us come here for different reasons. Barbara was here with a particular passion for accomplishing things through legislation and in her community, particularly for children. To honor her memory, we don't have to agree with Barbara on everything she stood for. As someone once said, if you agree with someone on everything, you probably need help. But if we simply remember why she was here and what drove her work, I believe we will be honoring her memory and advancing her mission. Thank you.
Mr. Sepulveda on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like you indicated, when you got elected in 2000, I got elected in 2012, and when I came to this chamber, Ms. Clark was a mentor and explained so much of the process here in the Assembly to me, but she was particularly informative and helpful with education policy and education legislation. She made it her mission to teach me about much of the legislation and much of the policies here and in New York City surrounding education. And she was so passionate, so driven to help educate and provide educational opportunities for the children of the state that I wanted to emulate her. And I sought her counsel and advice many times when I was proposing legislation for education for our kids. I want to thank the family for sharing us here, sharing her with the state. And I know that she is in heaven right now, and she is grinning, and she's very proud of the colleagues that she served with. And I know she's particularly proud of the Speaker because she once told me how proud she was of him. So thank you.
Ms. Arroyo on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, my respect to Barbara Clark family. Those that know Hispanic culture, the word Barbara in Spanish means strong, never give up, is there. That was Barbara. I thank God that I came to meet a woman when I came here in February 1994, 22 years ago. We are getting old. And I met this strong woman. I had met her before in educational areas, but I never met her as a legislator. She became my mentor, my friend, my sister. A day that a group of us decided that the Speaker had to go, she was the first one in the line. And we were there with Barbara, because it has to be a Barbara to do what Barbara Clark had done here. And I thank God for the opportunity that I have to meet this woman, to learn from her, and to remember her always. And I'm very sorry that I was not able to attend her funeral. I was in the hospital during those days. And I was thinking, God, should I go with Barbara or you are leaving me back to take Barbara's place? Thanks to God that I met her. And again, to the family, my respect, and Mr. Speaker, you should be very proud of her. Thank you.
Mr. Cahill on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Barbara M. Clark was a member of this body who many of us looked up to. When the days of unlimited discussion in our closed conferences existed, Barbara could be counted on for a good 20-minute, 25-minute, half-hour lecture on many, many of the subjects that she felt passionate about. We knew that when Barbara stood up, it was going to be fireworks. We knew that when she spoke, she was going to speak with the passion that she carried with her in every walk of life. She came from humble beginnings. She is actually, really, a coal miner's daughter from West Virginia. And she carried those roots with her every day of her life and every day of her representation. If there was one thing that Barbara demonstrated that she cared more about than anything else, it was young people. It was the children of this state. And among the children of this state, she cared greatly about their education. And she would fight with anyone vociferously to make sure that every single child had access to a quality education, no matter where they lived, no matter what kind of roots they had, even if they were a coal miner's daughter that moved to New York State. When she demonstrated her concern about children, another aspect of who she was came out. She was a black woman who grew up in the 50s, in the 60s. She had children. She knew the plight that so many young black men face. And she developed a certain level of courage that is unique to that type of human being. A woman growing up in the 50s or the 60s with young men in their life that they care so passionately about. And the other thing she would fight for was their safety, their security, their protection. She feared for their lives. And she was also a fiercely proud woman. So the day that one of those young black men was elevated to the position of Speaker of the Assembly, any issues that Barbara had with anyone else were put aside because one of her life's goals was achieved. May she rest in peace.
Ms. Gunther on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, I replaced my husband, Jacob, and Jacob was part of that wonderful coup with all of you, and especially Barbara Clark. So when I came to this chamber, I think she checked me out to see if I had the same spunk as Jacob did. And a lot of times people say to me, Aileen, do you want to go to dinner at night, or you want to go here or there? And I have spent the last years in the company of Barbara Clark and my friend Marge Markey. At one point we had Nettie and Toby, and every night Barbara would tell me stories about West Virginia, where my mother-in-law came from, how she drove a car at 14 and used to race around all over the yard, and how she married at 17, and as a young married bride, she moved away from her family, and how her mom, who's in the back, made her those wonderful curtains, and she remembers them arriving as she fixed up her little place with her new husband and her new baby. You know, those moments with her and all that she taught me, I would never have given up. And unfortunately, I wasn't at the funeral. And in that month, I lost two special people. I lost my mom, and I lost Miss Barbara Clark. And for giving her to me for all those years, I can never thank you enough. And you know what? To her granddaughter, I cannot tell you how proud she is of you. And I know that you are going to travel after your mom passed away, and she encouraged you. And I know that you're going to be something wonderful, just like your grandma. Thank you.
Mr. Perry on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to join my colleagues in celebrating the life and the accomplishments of my late colleague, Honorable Barbara Clark. I had the honor and the privilege to meet her on my taking my seat in the Assembly in 1993. And I know that many of my colleagues who came in my class felt as honored and privileged as I did. The colleagues who are just beginning their service can never imagine what they miss in mentorship, in a woman who knew about this house, this institution, and was never too selfish to take the time to share her experiences with new members. I didn't spend a lot of time or paid a lot of attention personally to Barbara, but you couldn't ignore what she was doing because she was a member who was certainly committed and very noisy about it. Her strong dedication to fighting for children, for education. You didn't want to mess with Barbara in a conference. You didn't share her view on protecting our children and improving our public education. If you had something to say otherwise, it would be best if you passed once she got up and had her say. She was more than a fighter for education for children. She was a champion. And she wasn't like Muhammad Ali bobbing and weaving, but she certainly could be stinging. And she was dogged and tenacious, but she was more like a straight arrow because you didn't have to guess where she was going or which side she was on, what her position was. My colleagues who did not have the opportunity to serve with her, I say that it is fitting for us to really celebrate because folks who did not know her are the ones who could cry. But those of us who know her know that she lived a life that was accomplished, and it was a real privilege to have served with her. May her soul rest in peace. Queens and New York City lost a legend, but I'm sure that her candle will go on to burn bright light of the hope for a future. That was her message all the time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Rea on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, during the service for deceased members, I had a good long while to reminisce about Barbara. And I first met Barbara 14 years ago during breakfast at the Old Quality Inn on Everett Road, where so many of us would get together, Republicans and Democrats, and it wasn't about party labels. It was about people, and it was about the people that we represented. And I was far younger back in those days. Some would call me a kid. And Barbara really took me under her wing. And I learned a lot about what makes us different, but more importantly, I learned a lot about what makes us the same. That we're all elected to fight for our constituents, that we're all elected at the same time to work together. And Barbara didn't care if you were Republican or Democrat, you know, as has been said, as long as you were pro-education. But she honestly was concerned about what was going on in your life. And certainly she was part of the fabric of this institution that will forever be weaved in all of us. And I know my years here were made better because of Barbara. Thank you.
Mr. Ra on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just quickly, I want to remember Barbara as a neighbor in the Legislative Office Building. There's about half a dozen of us on our side of the aisle at that end of the 5th floor, and then Barbara had her office in the corner there. And I can, recall many times, passing through whatever, and her talking to some of my other neighbors in that end of the hallway about their districts and getting a little bit of a feel for where we all came from. So it was, always great to see Barbara and certainly her staff, who were always friendly with us on our end of the hallway. So I think that end of the hallway won't quite be the same without her. But really, as somebody who considers education to be one of my passions as a legislator, I want to pay tribute and thank her for her tireless efforts on behalf of the school children, certainly of Queens and New York City, but of the entire state. And having had an impact on an area like that is certainly a heck of a legacy to leave. So I thank her for her service, particularly on that issue. May she rest in peace, and may God comfort her families in this time. Thank you.
Mr. Curran on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Clark was the better part of 30 years. And that is because my father, who was a bus driver at the Jackie Gleason Depot, worked for about 15 years with Barbara's husband, Tom, and they became close friends. And when I was graduating college, my father approached Barbara's husband and said, would you ever think about having your wife do a recommendation letter for my son? And Tom spoke to Barbara, and of course Barbara said, absolutely, bring him into my office. And I went into her office, and it took all of about 30 seconds to realize what type of person she was, how powerful she was, how much she cared about every single person that she came into contact with. I later learned, I got into CUNY Law School, I later learned, thinking that it was on my own merit that I got in there, one of the deans actually pulled me aside and said, listen, you got in because there was a recommendation letter from Barbara Clark. I have to tell you, I owe a lot to Barbara Clark. The next time that I saw her in person was 2010, when I got elected up here to this assembly. And I saw her actually at the elevator pit, and we hugged, and she said, I can't believe that you won. And I said, well, a lot of people feel that way, Barbara. She goes, no, Brian. She goes, I can't believe a Democrat won a Nassau County seat. And it was at that point I had to break the lady's heart and tell her that I was a Republican. But she quickly pivoted, and she says, you know what? That's all right, because I need an in with the Long Island senators who are all Republican, and maybe you can help me with a couple of pieces of my legislation. She was the true embodiment of what this House stands for. She's a credit to this House and to this state. I know what I owe her, but I know the people of New York owe her just so much more. To the family, I can't imagine your grief. I hope that she is well known throughout the state for all of our efforts on behalf of all the kids of this state for education. And I just want to say thank you, Barbara, for everything that you've done for me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Nolan on the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, just to restate it, Barbara was an exemplary member of the Education Committee. She was on it long before I have the privilege of chairing it now, and she was a very effective and strong member. She never stopped pushing legislation. She knew every bill on the agenda. You know, I had the privilege, obviously, of working closely with her, and I knew Jan very well, and so happy that her daughter is here today. And, you know, it's a family that has given a lot to our state, sad losses, but a tremendous legacy. And, you know, the service was beautiful at Allen. And today's service, I think Mr. Curran's remarks really encapsulate more than anyone what a wonderful, warm person, and Aileen's and others that she was. But I want the record to reflect her tremendous long legacy of success and achievement on the Assembly Education Committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Her memory will be eternal.
Thank you. Ms. Markey on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prior to being elected to the State Assembly, I worked with Jeff Aubrey and Eleanor Danker at the Queensborough President's Office. And we had a responsibility to try to get the Jamaica Economic Development Zone. And we took a trip to Albany to convince legislators to adopt that zone. The first time I met Barbara, she was sitting behind her desk eating an apple. Now, I tend to be a little prim and proper. And I was offended that she was sitting there eating an apple. But now I know why. Because we don't get lunch hours. It's true. When I was elected several years ago, Barbara and I and Aileen, we stayed at the same hotel. And we really developed a very close relationship with the three of us. We'd have dinner together, we'd talk. She was a wonderful woman. And she also, her name hasn't been mentioned, Maury. She had an intern, Maury, who was an opera star. And she worked for Barbara for several, maybe a year or two, and then went on to her own life. But Barbara was a wonderful woman. She cared so much about children. She cared about her colleagues. And she will be missed. Thank you.
Ms. Fahey on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I may have known Barbara Clark probably the least amount of time, but I knew her before I came into this position because of my work with the SUNY Center for Women in Government. And that was where we first met, and she was rather renowned there because during some of the leanest times in state government, back toward the height of the recession, when they were having a hard time placing fellows, Barbara Clark was always counted on to take one of the fellows and have for the spring semester. And these are graduate students that come in from around the country. It's a smaller program for women. It's often 10 to 20 women, and when they'd had a hard time placing, they always knew Barbara would. And I don't think the ink was dry on my election, and I certainly didn't know what my budget was going to be when she called to say, she was just so excited to hear that I was coming in, knowing of my role on the board there. And she said, "And you're going to take a fellow, aren't you? One of these young women." And as it turns out, I didn't have the budget, so she still kept carrying them. But each year we would go to speak to the women in a forum, and her eyes would just light up. So we heard a lot about education and about her passion on behalf of children. But this was just so personal, and she really is revered by the center for what she has done for young women. And she never missed an opportunity to speak with them, aside from taking the intern, to speak with the entire group. And she would just light up because she knew I shared the passion. And I thought when I heard of her passing that I would make sure that we continue to have those fellows each year because those women so rely on these extraordinary opportunities and an opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise to see government and to have this experience. And so I just want to let her family know she really has set an extraordinary legacy and is really revered within that program each year. So she will be remembered in so many ways. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Morelli to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would like to express, again, my condolences to the Clark family. I want to thank them not only for gracing us with their presence here today, but for sharing Mrs. Clark with us for the many years. And families do sacrifice to have their loved ones here in service, and so we're delighted to have them. Barbara, as so many people have said, was an extraordinary woman, and I will always remember, as I think all of us who served with her, her passion and her strength and her courage, and as many have mentioned, her complete commitment and dedication to children in this state. And I was always really impressed by the fact that Barbara would say her piece without regard to how many people agreed with her or disagreed with her. And she was clear to make sure that her opinion was expressed and expressed forcefully. And yet she could do all of that and disagree with you without ever being disagreeable. She was incredibly sweet and elegant. She had a great smile, an easy laugh. And I have to say, another common thread that you hear in so many of the comments that have been made by our colleagues is how nurturing she was. I think Barbara wished everyone would do well. And I, too, remember when I became majority leader, when you get a new position, you're always concerned as to whether or not you know what to do, are you doing it the right way. And she was so supportive and so encouraging. And as the speaker has said, almost maternal in the way she approached all of the colleagues here that she served with. I was also struck, I did have the privilege of being able to attend the services on her behalf. Just an amazing service. It was warm and loving and uplifting. And I think it was very much reflective of the love that Barbara had for her community and her family, but also the love that that community, that family, that neighborhood, the Queens community, this body, and the entire state felt for her. We loved her, we respected her, and are better for having known and worked with her. God bless you, Barbara Clark.
Will members please rise in support of the resolution? The resolution is adopted. In memory of our friend and former colleague, Barbara Clark, the House stands adjourned.